What is going on, dads? And welcome to the Betwixt, recorded on Sunday, January 24th, 2021. I'm your host tonight, John, and thank you for joining us tonight for some Xbox and Unfathomable Sacrifices. Hey, everybody. I'm just sitting here watching some Buffalo Bills, Kansas City Chiefs AFC Championship game. We are rooting for the Bills here. I live in Denver. We hate the Chiefs, and we don't want to see them have success. So we're pulling for the Bills, but I also acknowledge the greatness of one Patrick Mahomes and fully expect a Chiefs-Bucks Super Bowl. Welcome to the Betwixt. This is our second episode, and when I was thinking about what we were going to talk about this particular week, in the end, I decided, well, you know what? Instead of trying to come up with a topic, I've been obsessed with one game all week, and I thought this would be a great week to talk about it. So we're going to talk about a game called Life is Strange. Now, this is a game made by Don't Nod Entertainment back in 2015, and it's an episodic game. So it actually comes in 5 parts. And back in 2015, and I didn't start playing it until about a week and a half ago, they would release it about every couple months. So the first episode came out in January, and the final episode came out in October. So if you played this game as the episodes were coming out, it had to be kind of brutal because there are some really big cliffhangers here. But before I get too much into that, I wanted to talk about Don't Nod and how I got turned on to this game. This was a game I actually had seen years ago and was interested in. I would never say I'm into story-based games. I never really played many story-based games. But there was something about this game that I was really intrigued by, but I never got to it. And then I ended up playing the Switch for about 3 years, almost exclusively. My poor PS4 collected dust. Long story short, with my Xbox One X a handful of months ago, this same company, Don't Nod, released a game called Tell Me Why. And before I really knew it, I played Tell Me Why and really enjoyed it. That was a 3-episode game that came out. Really, really enjoyed that game, and then found out, this is the Life is Strange people. I gotta play Life is Strange. So ended up playing the first episode on PS4, but I had to give my PS4 over to my son. I didn't think I would ever get back to this game until I realized, this game's on Xbox too. And it turned out it was like 75% off. So a couple weeks ago, I ended up buying it. And let me tell you, I have played through the game now twice in just over a week. The last episode of Dads After Dark, I had mentioned that I think I had just finished episode 2. I was trying to do 1 episode a day over MLK weekend. Shortly after that, once episode 3 finished up on Monday, I got so addicted to this game, and we'll get to what happens at the end of episode 3 if you stick around for the spoiler portion of this review. And then I finished the game and was so smitten by it, I started playing it again. That's right. Like, when you finish a really good game and you're like, all I want to do is play it again? I did. So I just finished my second playthrough earlier this morning. So, so let's talk about it a little bit. First, let me give you a little background on the story. And here's what I'm going to do. This episode is going to be kind of 2 parts. I'm going to talk about the game, no spoilers, in the first part here, and then I'll go into spoilers and what I'm really talking to people who have played this game, or people who they're just not going to play this game, so you want to hear kind of what the story is about, and maybe that'll intrigue you to go play it, because I can tell you, no matter what spoilers I give you, playing the game is still a great experience. So the general story is you are a character, an 18-year-old girl, Max Caulfield, and you're a photography student at Blackwell Academy, and it's in a fictional town of Arcadia Bay, Oregon. So the game begins with you seeing this giant tornado that's coming at your town, and you don't know what's going on, and just as the tornado's hitting, you wake up and you're in class. Like I said, you're a photography student, you're in photography class, And you're just like, wow, that was a really realistic dream. And what happens through this game is this story where you realize that you can change time. And what does that mean? That means you have the power to rewind time. You have the power to go back in time. And what happens is when you change something that happens in the past, it affects the future. So there's multiple time mechanics going on here. And the way you sort of learn this is you see this girl shot to death in the bathroom while you're in there. And that's when you just sort of discover that you can rewind time. And what happens is she wakes up in the classroom again, and everything that happened in the classroom is happening again. And she realizes, oh my gosh, let me see if I can save this girl. And she does save the girl. So through these 5 episodes is this story about this girl that you saved, who she is, this other girl who has been missing in the town for about 6 months or so, and then some other events that are happening in the story. And when I say a story-based game, yeah, there's not like platforming or anything going on here, but there is quite a lot of action. First of all, you're moving around in the environment. You're not just responding to dialogues. You are actively moving around. You're choosing who you want to interact with. There's plenty of optional stuff here. You could get through this game doing probably 30% of all the total things you can do. There's lots of pictures you can take. There's just so much you can do in this game. And you are also choosing different paths of the story. So you get to decide, choose your own adventure style. What should I do? You want to do this or you want to do that? In addition to that, there are some sequences in the game which are a little rapid fire and might involve you missing a cue or something and having to rewind time and try again. There's also aspects of the game where they're kind of puzzle-like. You might do something, rewind time, make a different decision, and move forward by messing with the time mechanic. So even though it's a story-based game, there's definitely a lot of action sequences that you can play that make the game really fun. So I think it's like a best of both worlds thing. The game is a masterpiece, and it's hard to quantify why the game is so good. I think most, I'm going to say hardcore gamers or people like me, I wouldn't call myself a hardcore gamer, but I play a lot, right? I'm not a casual gamer. I take my gaming seriously and I play a lot in a year. And I love platforming. That's probably my favorite genre. But man, I don't know if it's maybe just Don't Nod that does such a good job with it, but playing through these games and playing through Life is Strange really makes me appreciate the genre. So if this is a genre you haven't played, Life is Strange is a great start to it. I'll say up front, since we're normally a Nintendo podcast, this game is available on PS4, Xbox, and mobile. Right now, it's not available on Switch. I would almost guarantee this game will come out on Switch at some point. It's just born for it. Now, when I finished this game and digested it for about a day, I put this game in my top 5 of all time. And that's a serious thing, right? I play tons of games, so why does this game get in my top 5? What makes this game incredible is that you have this freedom of choice to decide what you want your story to be, but at the same time, it has so much replayability in that the first thing I thought of once I finished the game was, I just thought of these little decisions that I made through the game. There's one part of the game where there's a girl who's having deep emotional distress, and you are trying to navigate your way, calming her down. How do you talk to her? If you've ever dealt with somebody who's been in emotional distress, you have to be very careful about the way you choose your words, how you encourage that person, how you come across as you're not just giving them lip service, but you're trying to convey how concerned you are. And there are some major events that can happen in this game if you do that wrong. And you can change the course of the game. So, the first time through the game, I actually did pretty well in handling that particular situation. But interestingly enough, I was like, wow, I'd love to see how the game would play if I didn't do so well. It's just sort of incredible. And when I did my second playthrough, There were some moments in that second playthrough where I was a little bored. Maybe I rushed through a couple of areas of dialogue, but for the most part, I listened to every line. It's all voice acted, of course. Listened to every line, was on the edge of my seat for almost everything. And whenever I made those major choices, I was so engaged to see how that did change the story. Now, the story is the other part of this game that's just so masterful. I am a huge fan of stories that are based in this world, right? Our world. Let's talk like Final Fantasy VII, right? People love, oh, what a great story to Final Fantasy VII. Yeah, but my problem with Final Fantasy VII and a lot of other games is it takes place in a different world. Characters might have some strange names. Maybe not particularly Final Fantasy VII, but, some of the later Final Fantasies. They have strange names. They're in strange environments. And who's going to take over the world and the universe will be destroyed. And those things become they're unconnected. But when you see a game that takes place in this world and, the main problem with this game, the main issue here is that there is a potential murderer on the loose, right? They're not going to take over the universe. They're not doing anything dastardly. They're not going to suck your mana force out of you. This is just real world accessible stuff. And it makes it makes it easy to connect. It'll connect with you depending on your life experiences differently. If you're a woman or a man, or if you've, known people in emotional distress, or just some way to connect with the character, right? I know gamers that can't even connect with a female protagonist. So if you're one of them, you're probably not going to like this game, right? But if you can see beyond the fact that it's a female protagonist and say, this is a real story that can happen to anybody, like most normal people should process a video game with a female antagonist, you're going to find this game incredible. So what makes you play a game like this twice once you've just finished the game? It really comes back to that replayability, and it really tells you how engaging that story is. Now, this game was built in 2015, and comparing that to Tell Me Why, which came out in 2020, there's definitely a technological upgrade to it. In fact, this game was the first in sort of the story-based games that Dontnod put out, and at this point they've put out 4. This game has a prequel and a sequel that came out, and then you have Life is Strange 2, which is the sequel, and then the prequel, which is Before the Storm, which takes place up until the beginning of this game. And then there is also the Tell Me Why series. My wife came in and was watching me play today, and she was criticizing the graphics, criticizing the syncing of the lips, that sort of thing. And I told her, look, I just played this game for 30 hours. I don't even see it or whatever. But I particularly love the graphics to this game. The graphics in this game, it's 3D rendered, but all of the textures are hand drawn. So they are, they're not intended to be super realistic. It looks like a painting has come to life. And that art style really grips you into the game. It's funny because it's such a gripping art style, but whenever you see the cover of the game, they show the picture of the main character, Max, and she looks more realistic, and you almost don't even recognize her. And then you realize, well, because you're kind of watching an artistic version of the game. But even today, the graphics hold up really well. The voice acting is great. The storytelling is magnificent. There's so many moments as you go through this game. I can say the end of episode 3 hits you like a ton of bricks, and then the rest of the game carries a really heavy weight. It's not to say the first 2 episodes don't carry that, but yeah, from the third, 4th, and 5th episodes are all extremely emotional. And if you are into those kind of moments, if you're like me and you like to cry to a game, you're gonna cry in this game, probably a lot. I cried watching the same scene multiple times, so that tells you where you're going there. But yeah, everything's great in this one. The 2 main characters, Max and Chloe being your friend, it's funny, Chloe is a voice actress. She does a great job. Apparently she was a YouTuber before and then tried her hand in voice acting. But she is also the voice actress for the main character in Horizon Zero Dawn, Aloy. So if you were really into that game and really became connected with that main character, you might really love this game because it's the same voice actress, if you're into that sort of thing. Anywho, can't recommend this game enough. It is available on PlayStation, Xbox stores right now for $20 for the entire game. You can get it on mobile for $9. I really can't recommend that. I think this is a great game to sit back and chill with a controller and not have your fingers all over a phone and covering up the beautiful art and the storyline and all that. That being said, I got it on sale on Xbox for $4 or $5 a couple weeks ago. So I got pretty lucky there. But if it's something you might be interested in, you might throw it on your wish list because you'll probably see that sale again in the future. Another thing is, I told you that this is a 5-episode game. The first episode is free everywhere. So if you just want to try for, one episode, it's about 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours. Give it a go for free. And obviously they're giving away that free episode because they know you're going to get hooked in, and you will. But yeah, give it, if you're not sure, just play through the first episode and tell me what you think. So at this point, what I want to do is I want to just take a little bit more time and have a little more, this is more for very spoilery. And if you're someone who has played through the game, I want to talk to you about this game. And if you just think you're never going to play this game, hey, let's tell you a little story. So you've been warned. First chapter of this game is Chrysalis. Interestingly enough, that was one of the potential titles for the entire game, but they decided to go with Life is Strange. So in this particular chapter, you see Max waking up. We see the murder in the bathroom, and this is when we discover our powers. And for most of this first section of the game, it's some of it is tutorializing, although you very rarely feel like you're being tutorialized too. But yeah, there's a lot of things happening in this first chapter that are kind of teaching you the mechanics of the time mechanic. You're going to be introduced to most of the characters in the game, which is mostly going to be the other students in the school. You never meet your parents, which is interesting. I found that curious. We really got to know Chloe's parents, but we did not get to meet Max's parents. There was some texting, but that was it. We meet a character named Victoria, and she is just, if you don't know a girl like this, you've seen a girl like this in the movies, right? Just the meanest, most stuck up, clique-driven girl who's all about her own popularity at, the extent of anyone else. And we really learn a lot, and she's a very deep character, we come to find out. And there's a lot of choices we can make throughout the game that affect our relationship with Victoria. And one of those is very early in the game, when Samuel drops the paint on top of her. Now, the paint drops down, and if you mess with the paint enough, which you need to do in order to get into your dorm, it won't be enough because the paint will drop down and they won't clear the area. What you need to do is pressure the water up to push Victoria and her friends over, and then drop the paint, and then it'll get all over her cashmere sweater. But it's right after that when you can either sympathize with her, which you're not inclined to do, or just let her have it because she just finished taking a picture of you and telling you to go fuck yourself. First time I played through this game, I played it nice. And then the second time through, I was like, no, I'm going to be an asshole about this. I'm going to tell her, yeah, go fuck yourself. And then you go post the picture on Facebook, right? But the third playthrough, I went back to being nice because I was really curious to see if I could affect that relationship with Victoria. And I was so happy I did, because you really do. It really does have an effect throughout the rest of the game. Reuniting with Chloe is a really well done moment where they recognize each other, even though it had been 5 years since they'd seen each other. And it really leads to this interesting introduction to Chloe And when I finished the first episode, I was like, wow. In fact, in my 30-second review of this game, I said Chloe's really fucked up. Like, she's got deep issues, and we know that that's because of her dad had died 5 years earlier. But man, she's like, the difference between Max and Chloe is fun, because Chloe and Max, they're such good friends, but they're such different people, right? Max is just not a wild child. Chloe is a wild child. And some of the parts where Chloe says, come on, girl, get your, you got a punk rocker in there, you know, like rock out. And I'm just like looking at Max going, she could not be, you know, more introverted and calm, but Chloe seems to know more about Max than we do. The whole first episode's great, and it ends with the snowfall that we see. That's when we start to know something is really amiss. Max is seeing these tornadoes, but the snowfall in like 80-degree weather with snow, and the way they end that episode, great soundtrack, by the way, unbelievable. But the way they end that episode with a shot of various people seeing the snow up against this music, and just that what's going on feeling, and it really sets up, you know, the rest of this game and how it's going to play out. And also right at the end of the episode, Max tells Chloe about her ability to affect time, and that leads to chapter 2, Out of Time. Now, in chapter 2, we kind of start off learning that one of our dorm mates, Kate, and this is who I was referring to earlier, is in a bit of a predicament, right? She's got a viral video that's out, and this is a very, you know, these are young girls, but they're, you know, she's very Christian, and she ended up in a situation where she was just making out with a bunch of guys. They posted the video, and she is in a panic about her parents seeing her and the church. And when we start this episode is when you start to realize how heavy this game is going to be. I had played the first episode and then stopped, and then I had played the first episode a second time because I was playing on my Xbox and I wanted to play through it again. And I was like, oh, wow, like this game is, wow, this is a heavy, real human situation. And, you know, through this episode, we have to talk Kate, not only try to calm her down, and they do a good job of showing how it's such a bad situation she's in. But then not only that, she ends up on the roof of the dorm threatening to jump, and we literally have to go to the roof and talk her down. And what makes that moment great are two things. One, that you can't use your time mechanic. So when you're talking to her, you cannot rewind time if you feel like you made a mistake. The second is, in order to talk her down, you kind of have to know about her. So when you go into her room earlier in that episode, look around, because yeah, like I remember you look around and you find out that her mom is really mad about her video. And she has this, you know, you have offended me and you have insulted our family. But you find out her, and also her siblings, but then you find out her dad is like, I love you. I love you. It's all that matters is I love you. And if you don't look at that later on, when she's on the roof and she says to you, you know, nobody loves me or whatever. And then you have like four choices, and you better say your father loves you. Because if you say your mother loves you, she'll be like, you don't even know anything about me. And then she jumps off the roof. I actually navigated through this perfectly the first time. And then when I played again, I was debating letting her jump. And then as you're answering the questions, you're kind of like, well, I don't know, but I'm just gonna answer the questions the best I can. And they threw an extra question at me. I don't know where this came from. I honestly don't know where this came from. She says something to the effect of, I'm gonna go to hell or something like that. And then you have to like respond. And the responses were very Christian responses. One of them was, sinners go to hell. And then the other responses were Proverbs. And I'm like, I don't know Proverbs here. And I don't know, excuse me. I don't know if I must have missed something in her room, but they didn't ask me the first time. But man, this second time I said, well, I mean, I went back to my early days as a Roman Catholic and I said, well, sinners go, I mean, like suicide, lands you in hell. She didn't like that. She said, well, I'm in hell anyway. And she turns around and jumps. I was okay with this only because I wanted to see how, this is a major change in the story, how that would affect the rest of the game. At this point, that's what I'm playing this for. And it really did have a big impact. Whereas if she doesn't jump, you hear a lot of, oh, we feel concerned with Kate or whatever, and Kate's in the hospital, and you see her at the end of the second episode in the hospital. And we'll talk about a little bit later what else happens. But in this time, she dies, and the characters have a deeper regret. There's a lot of, I should have done something. There are remembrances all over the building. Outside the building, there's candles. There's a setup in front of her door. People have it on their whiteboards. So it changes a lot. Definitely something, if you play it a second time, see if you can save her, see if you can let her jump, and you can see the differences here. Then most of this episode is you convincing Chloe about your time skills. Look, if you had a friend who told you that they can affect time and change time and go back in the past, you'd never believe them. So she has to prove that to Chloe. And I like the way she sort of does that, which is, I'm going to predict the future. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen here and here. I'm going to predict what is in your pockets. Things that are, and it's not her predicting, that's not her skill. It's just that she basically says, let me see what's in your pockets. Okay, and then she rewinds time to before she said, let me see what's in your pockets, and then just basically tell Chloe what's in her pockets. Then you end up, as if that's not enough to prove it, you end up going to a junkyard, and the bottle scene is whatever. It was fine. It wasn't the most inspired thing in the world, but they make you break a bunch of bottles. She's going to shoot a bunch of bottles, and to prove your ability to change time, she wants you to direct her shooting. I don't get how this works in a time mechanic, but whatever. I think this was more of they want to show you a shooting scene or an action scene or whatever, but whatever it takes for Chloe. And then we get to the very famous train scene where Chloe gets stuck on the train track and the train is coming and you need to get her out, which is the first time in the game where you're in a panicked, you cannot possibly save her without reversing time. There's so many things you have to do. And what I really love about this scene in playing it multiple times is that there are multiple ways to save her. You can run to the circuit board and try to cut a wire on the circuit board. You can basically go over, I think you have to get into the building and then you have to get a tool in there and then you can adjust the track. Or you can push this big, I think it's a big wire coil that's up above where you adjust the track and just shove it down the hill and break that off. So there's at least a few ways to get through this. I encountered a game bug the first time I played where the wire cutter was there and then Chloe was killed. But then when I rewinded, the wire cutter wasn't in my inventory and it wasn't in the drawer either. But luckily there are a few different ways to do this. All of these scenes really help you to connect with Chloe. You're having a lot of fun together, shooting the bottles. And when you're in the diner and she's asking you to tell her what's in her pockets, her mood is much better. And it is nice to see Chloe in a good mood with a smile on her face because she's often very moody, especially around her parents. So yeah, a big part that comes up here as well is I think towards the end of this particular chapter is a discussion because once Kate either dies or kills herself or doesn't kill herself, you end up in a room with your professor, Mr. Jefferson, and Chloe's stepfather who works security at the building, right? And there's a lot going on and you start hurling accusations. And this scene was interesting because in the first episode, there's a moment where David Madston approaches Kate and he's bullying her, and you can either step in and stop it or take a picture. And the first time I did this scene, I took a picture. And then Kate like admonishes you, and she's like, well, you could have done something instead of taking a picture of me, which made me feel awful. So I rewinded time and stepped in. I did the same thing in my second playthrough. I stepped in. In fact, I stepped in right away. But the third playthrough, I decided to take a picture. And that comes down to this chapter 2 here, because when you accuse David of bullying Kate, the principal actually doesn't believe you. So if you took a picture, even though Kate reacts really negatively to it, if you take a picture, I think that's my favorite path, because you say David was bullying her and he's like, do you have proof? And you go, yes, I do. And you show him the picture. So if you haven't done this path, that's a good one to do. Hopefully you can also save Kate. I was able to defend Kate by taking the picture, but she had jumped off the building, so that wasn't great. End of this episode, we see the eclipse. Again, things are going on. We've had the snow. Now we have the eclipse. Crazy stuff. That leads us to chapter 3, Chaos Theory. This is my favorite episode. This is the one where we start off, we break into the principal's office, right? Chloe wants to get some information about what's going on with her friend and what's going on with Kate and all of that. So we break into the principal's office. After that, we have the swimming scene, which is really fun. And then we have one of the worst parts of this game, when you have to go to the diner and talk between Nathan and the police officer and Frank. I couldn't stand this. Luckily, the second time went a lot faster. But what I really want to talk about here, look, we can talk about all that stuff and what have you. But the end of this episode blew me away. You know the expression, my jaw was on the floor? That was almost literally the case. I went into like a shock when this happened. When you go back into the picture, you save Chloe's dad. Okay, we've learned at this point now that Max can look at an old picture and then go back to that moment when the exact moment that picture was taken. She doesn't even know this at the time, but then she ends up in the picture, and this picture was taken of her and Chloe right before Chloe's dad, and the picture was taken by Chloe's dad, William, right before he went to go pick up his wife, and he ends up dying in a car accident. So Chloe's whole existence for these last 5 years have been her father died, and she's just, her life is just in shambles, and her stepfather is really mean, and her whole life is defined by this moment where she was a happy kid and always smiling, and now she's no longer. So Max goes back in time and realizes, oh my God, I can stop him from getting in the car. So it's kind of wild because you don't know what's going to happen here. And so you end up, hiding the car keys. It's kind of fun. There's a whole bunch of places to hide the car keys, but there's only one place where he will not find them. And then you hide the car keys. And so the end of the scene is you being really excited, even though Chloe has no idea why, because this is 5 years ago. You're very excited because you have stopped William from getting in his car. So he's not going to get in the car accident. And you're just so excited. And Chloe's like, what's going on? And you're just so excited. And then the picture, the picture ends. And then what happens is, and we see this a few times through the game, we see a set of pictures that not Max has taken, but we see a set of pictures that represent big, important moments in life. A picture somebody took. And you see some of them burn up, which means this memory did not happen anymore. And then you see new pictures form. And so what we see is, instead of, Chloe at the funeral, we see Chloe, go to a restaurant. Instead of, the father dying and the new father gets married to the mom, you see she continues on. She's going to graduate. She gets a car, just those normal life moments. And then Max comes to, and she's sitting on the front lawn of Blackwell Academy. Well, now she's sitting there going, what's going on? Because she's kind of just waking up to reality now from that same moment in time when she went into the picture. But now she's hanging out with the Vortex Club, which is wild to me. She's hanging out with the Vortex Club, and these people, including Victoria, that hate her, like, are her friends. And it's a really wild moment. And then she notices that her kind of boyfriend, a guy that's really interested in her, is like chatting up some other girl. And he's like, oh, that's weird. And then so she gets on the bus and she wants to go see Chloe because she wants to see if her father's alive. And she knocks on the door, and lo and behold, Chloe's father answers the door. He's alive. This is a great moment. Like, oh my God, he saved her. And he's like, oh, you're here to see Chloe. It's good to see you. And he goes, Chloe, you've got someone here to see you. And now as a gamer, you're sitting here going, I can't wait to see Chloe, because Chloe as a kid has long blonde hair, and Chloe as an adult has short blue hair. She's become very punk rock. She's all tatted up, everything, part of her rebellion. And you're waiting for Chloe to appear, and the camera kind of changes to from inside the house, and you see Max, and then there's this moment where Max slowly puts her hand over her mouth, and it's like, oh, what's happening? And then you see a wheelchair coming along the hallway, and then it pans up, and Chloe is paralyzed from the neck down in this super realistic, what someone who's broken their neck or back looks like. And it is just, and she's got the long blonde hair, and it's shocking. And then that's the end of episode 3. That was just so wild to me. And my jaw was open for a minute. I was just like sitting there like, what? What a great moment. Definitely, I'd love to know what you felt about that moment if you witnessed it. I think it's the defining moment in the whole game. And I guarantee you, anybody who bought Chapter 3 of this game was moving on to Chapter 4 for sure. They didn't lose anybody. Chapter 4 is Dark Room. And we start off with this situation where Chloe is paralyzed. And for much of the beginning of it, you're basically taking care of her, trying to get information about what happened to her, because you really don't know, even though you should. You walk with her. And the thing that resonates with me, clearly the writer of this particular part of the game has been with somebody who is in this situation, because it's so realistic. In fact, you're in her room and there's equipment, lifters, things that you wouldn't know exist, except for the fact that, someone knows they exist. This is what happens. It's dark, and I assume it's realistic, but it's just so dark, and it's so somber. Most of the time there is no music happening in the game. It's just, it really fits the mood. You end up watching a movie with her, and then here it comes. Chloe says she wants you to kill her. She's trying to save her parents from, crushing bills, and, her health is going downhill. She doesn't have terribly much longer. She hates what has happened with her parents, and everybody's stressed out, and she wants you to kill her, and you have to decide if you do. My first playthrough, I did it because I feel like that's what you would do for a friend who asks you. Second time, I didn't do it just because I wanted to see what would happen if I just didn't do it. There wasn't much of a difference in that choice there. Both times you just sit there with the picture that you're going to jump back to on her lap. Except in the first case, she's dead. And in the second case, she's just staring the opposite way because she's upset that you won't assist her in her suicide. And then, of course, predictably, we get back and we see the original Chloe. So what happens is she goes back into the past when that picture was taken, and she just has to sit there and let the father leave, knowing he's going to be killed in a car accident, which is luckily not something any of us have to do because we can't reverse time. But just imagining what that would be like, knowing, you're seeing your friend all happy and knowing what horrible tragedy is about to occur. I guess I would say it's akin to when you're watching like a video of somebody who's about to be severely injured or killed, and you're looking at them and they have no idea what's about to happen. You know, maybe a gruesome sports injury that's about to change someone's career or end their career, and they just think this is another play, right? Think Joe Theismann, right? So, just very weighty. But I think by this point, going back in time and having original Chloe back is a great feeling. It's like, oh, Chloe's back. We start getting more music, and now we're back on the trail trying to track down Chloe's friend and trying to figure out who pushed Kate to jump off the roof. The rest of this is very detective story. There's 3 locations that they go to. David's garage, which is Chloe's stepfather's garage. And then Nathan, who's one of the big bully at school, who's probably behind all this. And then Frank, who's a drug dealer that Chloe knows and used to date Rachel, who is the missing girl. Very detective-y. We have to get some clues, and then we'll come back to the room and deduce what's going on. But the really interesting thing here is the first playthrough, when talking with David and Chloe get in a fight, and you kind of have to take somebody's side. First time, I logically took Chloe's side, and the mom got mad, and she kicked David out of the house. Basically, we found out David's been filming the girls and has surveillance cameras in the house, and so she kicks David out of the house. The second time, I actually backed David, especially after we know what happens at the end of the game. I backed David, and Chloe was upset that I did. But it also, David was very thankful to me, and Joyce, his wife, was thankful to me for defending David. What happens in this is when you go to do those clues, David's in the house. So the first time you go into the garage and you can snoop around and you find David's locker, and you can basically just take a crowbar and break the lock off because you don't have time to fiddle around and figure out, where the key to this lock is. But the second time when David doesn't get kicked out of the house, he's in the garage, in the front area of the garage, not where the car is parked. And you have to do everything while he's there. So it's way different. You can't just break into the locker. So you actually use some time mechanics, and you can get the key for the locker, and then you go in there and you get what you need, and that's it. So I really like this part of the game. You're getting these clues, and then I like when she goes into Chloe's room and puts the board up. We try to figure it out. This is definitely the longest chapter too. Then you go to the barn, and that's when you discover that there's an underground layer, and this is where they've been taking the girls. It does lead to some information, some pictures that are found, and we find out that Rachel has been killed. We end up going back to the junkyard, which is where the train scene occurred earlier, and Chloe finds Rachel's dead body buried. They did a great job with this. They're digging, and then they smell Rachel, and there's this sort of like nauseated vomiting and stuff. It really kind of did a good job of putting you in. It wasn't just like, oh no, Rachel's dead. It's like, no, we literally are cutting through the dirt with our hands, and we're finding and smelling her body. It made for a really good moment. At this point, Max and Chloe go to the party, and they're trying to find Nathan, who they think is behind this. And it turns out Nathan did kill Rachel, but Nathan was in cahoots with, as we know, Max's professor, Mr. Jefferson. And he sticks a needle into Max's neck. That stops her from being able to reverse time, and then shoots and kills Chloe, and that's how this episode ends. One other comment I had about this too is that in the dark room episode, if you talk Kate down from the roof, there is actually a scene in this episode where you visit Kate in the hospital. You talk to her. There's a whole thing, and there's a lot of talking with Chloe too. In fact, Chloe apologizes for being a little impatient about you talking to Kate on the phone. That's a whole scene. But if Kate jumps off the roof, then that scene doesn't exist in this episode. So an entire scene is just missing from the story. It's fascinating. So obviously the cliffhanger here is that, oh my God, Mr. Jefferson is behind all this. And, when I played through it another time, I realized all of the camera equipment that's in the layer is a tip-off, but I totally didn't pick up on that when I was playing the first time. So that leads us into the final chapter, chapter 5, called Polarized. And now this is kind of where we know Mr. Jefferson is involved. We don't know the extent. Chloe is dead, and we've got to figure out what's going to go on. This is the weirdest episode because it relies on the time mechanic almost entirely, and we also see the fabric of time sort of breaking apart. So at the beginning of this episode, we have Mr. Jefferson. He starts monologuing, classic monologuing, talking about everything he did and why he did it, blah, 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 blah. He's taking pictures of Max, and, he tells Max she's going to die. But he tells her pretty much everything. Well, he can't know that she has the ability to change time. So she ends up kind of getting out of the situation by looking at a picture that was taken, I guess, that night before, when Mr. Jefferson was taking pictures of her when she was just in a lucid state. So she goes back in time and she's finding out more information about what's going on. Now, during this time, if you have befriended Victoria, and I think it involves early on in the game when you sympathize her when the paint hits her cashmere sweater, and then later in the game you have some conversations with her where you basically say, we're not enemies, we can be friends or whatever. You can really change that relationship, and you will find that Victoria, there's situations where Victoria can be there. She can actually be next to you while you are bound up, which I found fascinating. Now, eventually she's gone, and there's this kind of lame-ish excuse for Mr. Jefferson. You're knocked out and you come to, and he goes, I had to get rid of Victoria. And I think it insinuates that she's been killed. But it's a little weird. What did he do? Just go upstairs and kill her and put her somewhere and then come back downstairs? I don't know. I think it was more they didn't want to expand the story, but it is really cool to look down and actually see Victoria next to you and actually have a conversation with her. Anywho, you will change time, and what happens is she ends up going back, Max, looking at another picture. She ends up going back to the beginning of the game when she wakes up in the classroom. This is essentially the first scene in the game when she comes out of her storm dream. And so what would you do if you went back to the beginning of all these events to stop everything? Well, he looks up David's name in her school guide and just basically sends him a random text. At this point, he has no idea who she is. Sends him a text and says, you have to find the dark room. It's in the barn, blah, 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 blah. You know where it is. And yeah, sure. So basically that memory ends. Now she goes back to the current time, and we see that in that time frame, they've arrested Mr. Jefferson. Everything's good. And she wakes up on the plane headed to San Francisco. And I didn't really talk about this, but there was a photo contest. And so really this feels like it could almost be an ending of the game. She is on this plane. She has won this contest. Chloe's presumably alive, and the professor, Mr. Jefferson, is been taken away. He's in jail. While she's at the museum, really enjoying the accolades and everything, she talks to Chloe on the phone, and the tornado is hitting the town actively at that moment. And that's when we realize this game is not over yet. It's just like a final boss, right? It's like, oh, I thought we were done, but no. The final boss is still yet to appear. So she realizes she's done nothing because this tornado is going to kill Chloe and kill everybody in the town. So she has to undo everything. And how does she undo everything? She goes back in time to when she took the picture that won the contest, and she tears it up. Now she won't win the contest. Then she wakes up, and now where is she? She is back with Mr. Jefferson bound up in the chair. So the theme of this whole game is this butterfly effect thing. They reference it many times throughout the game, where one change can cause such a difference. You can't just do one little thing and just change this one important thing. You can't just go and save Chloe's father from being killed without getting Chloe paralyzed. That's just the way it is. And it's a whole bunch of fun. So the rest of this game, the way it plays out is that it turns out David, because you did notify David about what's happening, David figures out what's happening, and he actually comes to save you. There's a sequence where David comes down into the dark room, and he fights with Mr. Jefferson. It is really hard not to get David killed. The first time I did this, you have to constantly rewind time. David will, pick a bottle up and throw it at him, but Mr. Jefferson shoots him. And David will push a table, and then, Mr. Jefferson still gets a gun and kills him. David will pick up a gun, and Mr. Jefferson will pick up a gun and shoot him first. It's a little weird because Mr. Jefferson's a professor. He's a serial killer, but he's a professor. David is ex-military and a security guard. For some reason, Mr. Jefferson always gets the better of David. But anyway, there is a way, we know, to get past it. And we go through this series of memories. I thought the memories were beautiful. It's basically like a way, because remember, this game has been about 9 months from the first episode to the last episode. And so they wanted to remind you of all the moments that occurred in the game. And so you start walking through these little set pieces of moments in the game. And wow, you really, even though I had played this game in a compressed amount of time, like 3 or 4 days, it's like, wow, look at all these great moments you had with Chloe, all these great memories that are coming. And eventually you exit out after all of this into the diner, and basically every character in the game is there. The main characters, Chloe, Joyce, William, all the people from the school, but even the characters some people might not ever see. There's a homeless woman behind the diner. If you go behind the diner and meet the homeless woman, and even though some of her conversation may not seem really that important, at one point you can tell her that a tornado is going to hit. And later in the game, when the tornado hits, if you go behind the diner, she'll either be dead underneath a car or she'll be gone, meaning she knew a tornado was coming and she got away. So there's just so many little pieces in this game that can really change what happens down the line. They don't have huge changes in the story. Like I said, it's just, is the person there or not? But wow, there's a huge impact here in terms of I saved this person's life versus I did not save their life. And eventually it comes down to this diner where everybody's in there and they're all saying don't kill me, blah, 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 blah. And eventually you're in the tornado again with Chloe. And what happens? You have the choice. You can either, the tornado's coming. You can either go back to the beginning of all of this when you were in the bathroom and Chloe was shot and killed, and just go back to it and don't change a thing. Basically, the reason why the fabric of time is breaking and the tornado's hitting is because you've changed all of this reality. And you can just go back and go, you know what? I'm not going to stop this chain of events from occurring at all. Or you can decide, hey, Chloe, let's get out of Arcadia Bay, let everyone fend for themselves, and run. And so really it comes down to, do you want to give up Chloe's life to save the town? Or do you want to give up the town's, life, whatever you want to call it, and run away with Chloe? What would you do? What did you do? It looked like it was a 50-50 shot. I think it was a 52-48 last I saw. And first time I sacrificed Chloe. It seemed like the right thing to do. Chloe dies multiple times in this game. She's probably going to die in the near future because she just flies off the handle a lot. And you save Arcadia Bay and you go back. Or, I did that first. And let me tell you, that ending, if you haven't done that ending, sacrificing Chloe, is brutal. You end up going back in time. You're in the bathroom, and instead of doing something, which involves hitting the fire alarm, you just sit there, and Max listens to the argument and listens to her friend be murdered, and she knows it's going to happen, and she listens to it. And then it follows up with going to Chloe's funeral, and you'll see several characters at the funeral, and some characters may or may not be there depending on if they die in the game. So it's a really heavy ending to the game. Today on my second playthrough, I decided to sacrifice Arcadia Bay because I was like, I don't want to see Chloe die. I want to hang out with Chloe and I want to see what happens. That ending was very much less heavy. The tornado lays waste to the town. We see the hint of someone dead under a blanket, but we don't see anybody else that we know that's dead. We don't see Chloe's mom. We don't see Warren. We don't see, any other of our friends. We really don't know. We just see Max and Chloe drive away. We see Chloe cheer Max up, and they just drive away. Not as satisfying an ending, but I did want to see it, and I played through the whole game to see it. So, but I also know Kate died. So, I feel like they could have done that part a little bit better. I would like to have seen maybe. I was kind of expecting Joyce would be dead, and that Chloe would be upset over Max's choice, and maybe one of those endings where, you sacrifice the Bay for Chloe, but Chloe is mad that her mother died. But we didn't really get that, so what can you do, right? So I'll tell you, man, that's a great game. There are a ton of achievements in the game for optional pictures. There's some really funny ways to get pictures that you wouldn't have seen in the game. And there are a lot of parts in the game where you just see somebody and you can take a picture, but that's what you're supposed to do. There's other parts in the game where, especially if you have conversations with people and then they reveal things to you, and then you rewind time and then you sort of reveal those things to them first, you might get a photo opportunity. Other times it's just exploring your whole environment. Like I said, go behind the diner. There's a whole area behind the diner you would never see because you just walk behind there and there's like so much to do. Talk to the random people on the street, the truck driver in front of the diner. There's so many just cool little things you can do. There's a food in a garbage can, which you can feed a squirrel to get a picture of the squirrel, just to let you know like what happens there. So, I can't. Honestly, man, this game is amazing. I really hope it comes to Switch. I would totally start playing through it again. It's certainly capable of being on the Switch. So I'll be playing this game again. But I've got a couple games coming out on Xbox first that you're going to see some 30-second reviews of in the near future. But once that's done, I'm going to be doing the prequel for this game. Probably play through that a couple times, and then maybe down the road, probably play the sequel. It's it's a direct sequel from what I've heard, but it's not the same characters. So, but I can't wait to play that too. So, let me know what you think. If you haven't played this game, if you haven't played this game, you might not be at this part of the podcast. But if you have played this game, I'd love to hear about what you felt about the game. Did you love it as much as me? Were there any interesting changes if you played it multiple times? Let me know. I really want to hear about that. If you haven't played the game, maybe you listened to this part thinking you never will, and now you're like, let me check it out. I cannot recommend it enough. There's so much more to this game than what I talked about. I'd probably ruin some things for you. Hey, that's your fault. But give it a playthrough, man. This game is so cool. Can't say it enough. Just play chapter 1. Tell me what you think. Anyways, that's going to be the end of our Betwixt for this week. Drew and I will be back next week. We've got some really cool games that came out, and we're going to be talking about them. And he played his 49-cent game that he's really excited about, so we're going to hear about that as well. Anywho, good night, dads. Good night.
The Dads After Dark show is a part of the Nintendo Dads family of podcasts. You can subscribe to us anywhere podcasts are available, including iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher. Be sure to join us on the Nintendo Dads Discord in the Dads After Dark show channel for some naughty After Dark talk. Follow us on Twitter at @NDadsAfterDark. Ask us a question, and we may answer it on the show. That's all for tonight. Good night, Dads. Sweet dreams.